for the win. Garnett on the slam low. Here's a Curry way downtown. Oh, what a shot from Curry!
What's up, NBA fans? Dom2K on the mic, and I'm pretty excited for this NBA season. Last year when the Warriors got together, it was pretty much a foregone conclusion that they were going to become champions, so it wasn't really a surprise when they went on to win 67 games, along with going 16-1 in the playoffs. However, this year is just a tad bit different. Yes, I think again that if betting is your thing, you obviously would only put your money down on Golden State again, as they'll likely be hoisting that trophy in June, but at this point I'll take what I can get as far as entertainment. This was the best offseason in NBA history by a pretty wide margin, and with an exciting influx of rookies such as Ben Simmons, Lonzo Ball, Kyle Kuzma, and our third or fourth attempt at Joel Embiid's career, I'm really looking forward to watching games more than I was last year. And with that excitement, it's only right that I do predictions for the 8 spots in each conference. Here's the catch. This year, I'm not predicting what order the teams are going to come in because I feel like that's pointless, and as we learned last year, some teams that look good on paper just don't end up translating to the court. Injuries and chemistry potentially screw everything up, so I'm going to save myself the headache of looking that far into the future without a crystal ball. But I'll still be given a general idea of how I think they're going to do in each conference, so without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. We're starting with the East because it's easier, and I don't think there's much debate to be had here. This year's Eastern Conference is the result of years of bad decisions in front offices, free agency, and your regular bottom-feeding teams that never make any noise. Luckily for us, we may not have to suffer much longer because the NBA is finally growing a pair with the news that they may do away with conferences soon. In the meantime, I think we can comfortably say the Cavaliers are going to end up being the first or second seed, and they're going to cruise through the East to the finals as usual. However, I do want to say one thing about them. It's probably not news to you at this point, but health risks are at an all-time high for the squad right now. Rose and Wade were solid pickups, especially considering that they're on a team that's 10 deep, but there's still zero guarantee about where they're going to stand another 6 or 7 months from now. There's also the curious case of Isaiah Thomas's hip, and although I hope he'll be 100%, you just never know how a player is going to perform coming off of an injury that causes him to miss around 8 months of NBA action. So those are 3 very big question marks, and it could definitely change things for them if they're in and out of the lineup from a chemistry standpoint. However, as usual, the East is a cakewalk, so as long as nothing happens to LeBron, this squad really should have no problems of getting a good seed in the East and eventually getting out of it. The next team that'll probably be securing a spot in the East is the Boston Celtics, but I'm especially interested to see where they place now that Kyrie Irving has his dream of being the leader of his own team. Remember, last year the Celtics were a group of defensive players mostly led on offense by Isaiah Thomas. This year there's Kyrie, Hayward, Tatum, Jaylen Brown should be seeing more minutes. They've really went from a fully defensive team to a fully offensive team, or almost a fully offensive team. Considering that, and the fact that there's been so much personnel change in important roles, it's hard to say whether Boston is going to make another hard push for the first seed, or if they'll be one of those middle of the pack teams like the Raptors. In any case, the most important factor will be Kyrie's evolution as a leader. People have given this man such a hard time saying he's never going to do anything without LeBron, but even before he was a Celtic, I've been saying let's give this guy a chance to lead a team that was built around him with legitimate pieces. Before LeBron came, we saw Kyrie with guys like Dion Waiters before he emerged, Alonzo G, and a lot of 2K generics. I'm willing to bet that he can do something better with actual starting pieces, so let's just see how it goes. And sadly, after we get past the Celtics and the Cavs, we've got really not that much interesting stuff to talk about. The Wizards are going to be in the playoffs. I think John Wall is the best point guard in the East, and he's shown improvement every year, but Washington as a whole just did not get any better. When you lose in a game 7 of a second round and your biggest offseason move is resigning Otto Porter to a massive contract because the Nets basically forced you into it, I just don't think there's a lot to discuss. I thought last year they could have given Cleveland a good fight if they had beaten Boston because the speed at which John Wall could run that offense, and that was clearly an issue for Cleveland. But their defense was always lackluster, and Cleveland went out and got even deeper. So aside from another monster season from John Wall, I don't see anything significant coming out of Washington other than another playoff appearance. The way I feel about the Wizards, that's the exact same way I feel about the Raptors. If you followed my social media since before I ran this channel, then you'll know I've never believed in the Raptors. Every year I get told not to sleep on them, only for it to end up the same exact way with them struggling in the playoffs to eventually either lose prematurely or to LeBron James. Which one is going to happen first this year? I don't know, but it's going to be one of them. See, Toronto still suffers from that same problem they had last year, and the one before that, and the one before that. They still don't have that third guy next to DeRozan and Lowry yet to be taken seriously. I really thought Lowry was gonna see this and take off in free agency, but he stayed and the lineup more or less looks exactly the same as it did last year. I will admit DeRozan continues to improve and I'm hoping he'll reach superstar status soon, but other than that, the Raptors are probably gonna have another decent season only to be firmly dealt with in the playoffs. Now, this next team I actually am very excited about. The Milwaukee Bucks have been on our radars for some time now, and when they made the playoffs and won a single game against Chicago in 2015, people immediately noticed their length and speculated that they'd be a problem in the future. Although they haven't broken out to elite team status yet, and there are many questions as to if Jabari Parker is ever going to materialize because of all those knee injuries, you know what we're all excited about? Yes, the Greek Freak, the player I said about 7 months ago would go on to become the face of the league once LeBron's reign is over. There's really no shortage of positive things you can say about this guy's potential. He's a freak of nature just like the two best players in the league right now in Kevin Durant and LeBron James. While I don't think they have a team to scare anybody this year, I still fully expect them to build on last season by going on into the playoffs, and I'll be keeping a close eye on Giannis' development. When you watch him play, it's pretty clear that the only thing his game is lacking is a consistent shot. If he manages to get that down and open up the floor for himself and his team, he'll have taken the next step in being able to lead a team deep into the playoffs. Oh, and there's also the fact that he plays with another potential demigod in Thon Maker, so his development is going to have a big say in how far this team goes as well. Next up, if the Hornets don't get back into the playoffs, I'll be fairly disappointed. Yeah, Nick Batum is going to be out for a while, but Malik Monk looked pretty solid in the preseason, so that should be a nice boost for them in his absence. Kemba Walker is a good point guard as well, and they basically traded Roy Hibbert out for Dwight Howard, and I don't care what you have to say about Howard or if you think he's soft, that's an upgrade no matter how you look at it. On top of that, the Bulls and Pacers both lost their stars and have entered full rebuild mode, meaning their playoff spot should be wide open for the taking, barring any unforeseen Cinderella stories. With that being said, I'm not really sure what other circumstances the Hornets need to make the playoffs again, and that's why I'm giving them a spot. Don't let me down, Charlotte. And like I said, with two spots that have opened up, why can't the Miami Heat slide in this year? I just mentioned Cinderella stories, and the Heat were almost a huge one last year after starting the season like a typical lottery team. They were able to turn that around to a 41-41 record, but the dream ended in heartbreak because they were tied with the Chicago Bulls, who instead qualified for the 8th seed. Well, like I said, the Bulls should be at the bottom of the East this season, and with that, hopefully Miami's health will be good early on in the season so they don't start in a hole they gotta dig themselves out of. If that wish comes true, then they've got one of the best centers in the game with Whiteside, Goran Dragic is still there, Dion Waiters out of nowhere turned his career around, and they've even picked up Kelly Olynyk, who temporarily turned into an all-star in last year's Game 7 against the Wizards. I know, it's an exaggeration on Olynyk's part, but the point is, in the East, this core proved they could hang last season, and the East is weak enough that they should be able to qualify if they can at least build on what they did last year. And that leaves us with the final spot for the Eastern Conference, and while this isn't a really difficult choice, it still may end up being the wrong choice. If the season goes as expected, the Hawks, Knicks, Nets, Bulls, and Pacers should all be terrible. If there was a team out of that group that surprised us, maybe it'd be Atlanta, but I'm going with what's more likely. With those teams down, that leaves us to choose from the Sixers and Pistons, and I'm taking the Sixers with a huge asterisk. See, the Sixers have tanked their way to a pretty young and exciting roster with talent that could develop into something scary one day. That potential could also be completely gone in the next 3 to 5 months because they're so damn injury prone. Embiid is clearly going to be one of the best, if not the best center in the NBA if he can stay on the court, but that's a huge if. I want to see his career blossom, but a man of his size with multiple injuries to his knees and feet, I would almost say, especially with the way he lands, that it's more likely he's going to get hurt again. But on the flip side of that, if he proves me wrong, which I sincerely hope he does, there's no reason the Sixers can't finally make their long-awaited return to the playoffs. Hell, there was a point last season before Embiid mysteriously got hurt where it seemed like Philly would sneak their way back into the playoffs, so I know him and Simmons can make that happen if they're healthy. I really liked what I saw from Simmons in his debut, and while there's not much to go off of, the raw skills look like they're there, especially with the passing. From a Celtics fan, I'm rooting for you guys to stay healthy, cause at very least I know Embiid can be one of the most exciting players in recent memory. Dude's a demigod straight out of NBA 2K. And now for the much anticipated Western Conference. I don't want to add to the runtime by telling you how superior the West is to the East, cause chances are you already know, so let's just jump right into it. No need for suspicion here, the Warriors are leading the West again. Despite all of the moves that happened in the league this summer in response to their super team, let me see if I can put this in a way you're gonna understand. This team is full of snipers that already won the championship, they should have won 70 games last season, and they went out and got 2 more shooters to add to their bench after retaining everybody who was important in the first place. In other words, the team that many of you called the most stacked team of all time got even better. They're going to be more comfortable this year because they have had a whole year together, and if they do any better than they did last season, they're going to be challenging their 72-9 season from 2016. Yes, the West has gotten tougher, but when this team is at their best, there's still not anybody on their level, so that much hasn't changed. Now, what has changed is a team or two got closer to them, and that's what's piqued my interest about this season. Take for instance at my next spot, the Oklahoma City Thunder. Just 2 seasons ago, a roster featuring Westbrook, George, and Anthony may have been favored to win the championship, but definitely favored to get out of the West. The morning the Melo trade went down, I recorded a video calling their big three unique, but admitting I didn't quite know how they plan to fit all the pieces together during the season. Since then, we've seen them play, we've gotten a better look at their strategy, and here's what we know. It looks like Carmelo is going to be running at the power forward, which was a pretty simple detail I glanced over when the trade actually happened. I forgot that the Knicks' best season came with Melo when he was starting at the 4, and while he's not the same guy from 2013, there still benefits from this. In his older age, it's probably better to have him guarding 4s instead of 3s because of speed, and it also allows Roberson to start at the shooting guard position to boast his defensive ability next to George. He can't shoot worth a damn, but that defense is valuable. Finally, it gives you a credible low post option instead of having 3 guys amongst the wing that'll take turns scoring off the dribble. Even with all the good that can and probably will come from so much talent playing together, there's no getting past the fact that OKC has no bench. And I think the Miami Heat proved in 2011 that even if you have 3 mega talents in the starting lineup, you can lose to a more well-rounded team that has less star power than you. Well, Golden State has just as much star power, and they're more well-rounded while playing both sides of the ball better. So I don't see the Thunder beating the Warriors this season, but boy, I sure do hope that ends up being the Western Conference Finals, cause that's a lot of star power between those 2 teams. On top of that, we would get to see Westbrook and Durant in a playoff series, and Kevin Durant going back to Oklahoma. That would just be a lot of fun. Next up, I'm marking the Spurs down out of respect of how consistent they've been, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a bit worried about what level they're going to reach this year. Kawhi Leonard is very highly respected amongst those who really know basketball, but I still have my questions. First, Tony Parker is slated to return in November, which surprises me because I thought a ruptured quad at his age meant the end. Even with his return, how good is he actually going to be? Is he still the starting point guard? And if he's not, is his replacement going to be as good? What about Kawhi Leonard himself? He missed the preseason, and it's been rumored that he could miss the beginning of the season with his injury. And despite the Western Conference making huge moves this summer, the Spurs' biggest move was picking up Rudy Gay, who's making his way back from a torn Achilles. Well, to be honest, he couldn't have gone to a better place in San Antonio because they've proven they can make something out of anything, and it's definitely good to have him there with Leonard if he's still capable of providing scoring, because somebody on the perimeter needs to be able to create other than Kawhi Leonard. But I guess all I'm saying is that I'm just not as confident in them as I have been given the changes to the Western Conference. But they're still the Spurs, they still have Popovich and most of their important pieces, and we all know Pop treats the NBA season as a marathon and not a race. So I'm sure by May, if they haven't been too unfortunate with health, everybody is still going to be ready to go, and their fundamentals will still have propelled them to about 50 wins. And how about the team the San Antonio Spurs sent home last year? Houston is obviously in the mix, and boy, their offense is about to be explosive. I love that Mike D'Antoni came out with a quote about a week ago basically admitting he doesn't care about coaching defense, but we already knew this. His philosophy is to score as many points as possible, and that's not going to be difficult to do with Harden and Chris Paul running the offense based around a ton of snipers. And yes, while the Rockets do have some defensive guys like Chris Paul, PJ Tucker, and Clint Capella, again, this is a D'Antoni team. They're going to bank on outscoring their opponents, and they're probably not going to be known for their defense. That'll get them a ton of wins in the regular season, and even take them far in the playoffs against a team like the Spurs as they did last year with just Harden. But it's obviously not going to be enough to address the elephant in the room with the Warriors. That's a squad that's capable of outscoring you while hounding you on defense, and while the Rockets do low-key have some defenders, it's not going to be their focus. They're going to be so much fun to watch, but don't expect the finals berth in Houston unless there's injuries elsewhere. As I said in my 2018 prediction video about a month ago, it's now or never for the Wolves, seriously. Cat and Wiggins are consistently getting better, they've added the second best shooting guard in the game, filled out the roster with multiple veterans, and I just don't know what else they could do to assure themselves a playoff spot outside of signing Chris Smoove. I'm voting that Minnesota finally ends a playoff drought that's lasted since 2004 in the Kevin Garnett era, and if it doesn't, I'm losing all hope in this team forever. And this is where it gets kind of ambiguous. There were a lot of moves concerning the West this summer, so I feel like people thought there were just 8 or 10 stacked teams in the West, and there's really not. For instance, the Rockets gained Chris Paul, but the Clippers, who are my next pick for a playoff spot, were the ones that lost him. Did they gain a lot in his absence? Sure, but losing one of the best point guards and players in the league, you can never be too sure how good a team is going to be after that. Personally, I think the Clippers might have gotten better on the sly. Their new point guard was the prospect from overseas, who people immediately named the best passer in the NBA. From the highlights, I won't say they're wrong, but but it's a small sample size and I've heard his defense is a gigantic liability. Well, it's a good thing that they picked up Patrick Beverley then, who's one of the best defenders in the league, right? On top of that, they were able to bring in Gallinari and Lou Williams, meaning the Clippers officially have the supporting cast they actually needed when Chris Paul was there. So while I don't expect any deep playoff run from the Clippers led by Blake Griffin, they now remind me a bit of the Nuggets when they traded Carmelo. They lost their best player, but they did an awesome job rounding the team out and avoiding that situation where the team becomes a bottom feeder because a star left. I expect them in the playoffs if everyone stays healthy. With 2 spots left in the Wild West, it's getting tight because unlike the East, there's still about 4 or 5 teams that you can make a playoff argument for. For my 7th pick, I'm going to choose the Grizzlies. Yes, they lost both Vince Carter and Zach Randolph and the grindfather Tony Allen, but they retained their best players in Gasol and Conley. And you're probably going to laugh when I say it, but Chandler Parsons is still in the NBA and he's still on the Grizzlies. With the absurd amount of games he's missed in the last 2 seasons, it can get hard to remember that he's still here, but he's still good for close to 15 points a game if he's actually on the court and healthy, which is a huge if. It probably doesn't help your confidence in it that Conley has caught the injury bug the last couple of seasons too, but look, I can't predict injuries. Given the teams that the Grizzlies would have to beat out to get one of the last spots in the West, I think Conley and Gasol could pull that off, especially if by some miracle Parsons is still there late in the season. The flip side to losing Zach Randolph is that they can speed up the tempo a bit, and I'm just not ready to say a healthy Grizzlies led by Conley and Gasol can't get one of the last spots in the conference. Remember, the West is top heavy, and it's not quite like it was in 2013 or 14 where everybody was a 50-win team. And with the 8th and final spot, with still a few teams out west that on paper seem like they could make the playoffs, I'm gonna say the Blazers get in for the 3rd season in a row. Some of you are frantically wondering why I didn't pick Davis and Cousins, and here's why. The Pelicans simply didn't fill out the roster like I thought they needed to over the summer. Yes, it's true that they have 2 of the best big men in the game, but their roster outside of those guys still lacks a good fit. They paid a pretty penny to bring back Drew Holiday, and he's a good player, but they also went out and signed Rajon Rondo, and what the Pelicans actually needed was sharpshooters. When these 2 teamed up in February, the excitement came from the potential of a roster featuring Davis and Cousins surrounded by players that could space the floor. This summer, I was hoping guys like Redick or Gallinari would be interested in helping them do that, but I didn't even see their names pop up in rumors. And so, coming into the 2018 season, more or less this Pelicans roster is still 2 superstar big men, Drew Holiday, a wild card in Rondo because you never know how that's going to work out, and a bunch of 2K generics. Rondo is going to miss the start of the season with a sports hernia, and then when he comes back, I guess he's going to run the point while Holiday runs it too? Well, for one, Holiday has always been a natural point guard, and even if he can play the 2, he's not going to be raining threes, which is what would be ideal for spacing with Davis and Cousins. In short, I don't think the Pelicans are proven, I don't think they got much better this summer, and I don't think Cousins and Davis combining for 50 points and 20 or 30 rebounds every night is going to result in a crazy amount of wins. This is one of those predictions that I'll gladly just accept being wrong about if it does happen, but from where we're sitting in October, I just don't see it. Then there's a nugget who I was also debating about. Paul Millsap's addition is exciting, especially because he's being paired down low with Jokic, and I'll just admit I chose the Blazers because they've got more time together and they've proven with Lillard and CJ that they can get to the playoffs. But I do want to say if the Nuggets end up with one of those last spots instead of the Blazers, I won't be surprised at all. And that's all I got for you guys today. The season starts tomorrow, and I'm hoping LeBron James is going to be there for the season opener because I've heard about his ankle issues and whatnot, so it should be a good day, especially with the Rockets and Warriors. I want you guys to let me know what you think in the comment section about the 8 teams you think are going to make the playoffs in each conference. I don't care if they're in order because I didn't really do mine in order. It's just a fun thing to do to come back in a couple of months and see if we were right about who actually makes the playoffs. Anyways, make sure to hit the like button, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed, and hit the bell next to my name if you want notifications on my videos. Also, I am going to be posting on my second channel that I advertised a few months ago. I never got around to actually posting on it, but I have been recording a ton of footage that I'm going to be using primarily from 2K, and I've got a good idea for a series over there, so make sure to go subscribe to Dom if you're not already. The link will be in the description and in the comment section. Thanks for watching. I'm Dom2K, and I'll see you guys on the next one.